This is Deep Night Whispers. Tonight, we open a file that was never meant to be found. It begins with a photograph. Faded, sepia-toned, edges curled by time. In it, a Southern family poses on the veranda of a plantation house. The year is 1859, just before the country begins to eat itself alive. The father stands rigid, waistcoat buttoned, his wife to his left, her hand poised like a question that will never be asked. Children arranged before them, faces smooth and still too still. But it's not the family that holds the eye. It's the background. There, slightly out of focus, stand 3 enslaved women. One of them young, her dress simple, but clean looks directly at the camera. And in her hand, folded so tightly it leaves creases in her palm, is a small square of paper. That paper changes everything. A century and a half later, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, an archivist at a university in Virginia, finds the image mislabeled in a forgotten box. Family, Richmond, 1859. The tag reads, nothing more. But Sarah has seen hundreds of plantation portraits, and none like this. Enslaved people were rarely positioned in portraits with their owners, and if they were props, background texture, proof of wealth. Never not once were they holding anything. Objects meant agency. And agency was forbidden. Sarah studies the glass plate negative under magnification. The details sharpen like teeth, the fraying threads of the woman's sleeve, the faint shimmer of the paper between her fingers. What looked like a random fold now reveals deliberate creases. Corners bent into pattern, lines intersecting like a map. She feels her chest tighten. This is no scrap. It's a message. History often hides itself in plain sight, waiting for someone patient enough to listen. Sarah begins to dig. The family is identified, the Ashfords of Richmond, wealthy, respected, cruel in ways they never had to name. Their estate, long burned and rebuilt, was one of the largest slaveholding properties in the region. In the family's surviving letters, she finds references to a troublesome servant girl, clever, literate, difficult to manage. Her name, Clara. And then, in one brittle sheet of correspondence from August 1859, a single chilling line. The girl must be sold, she knows too much, and the children are beginning to ask questions. Sarah sits back from the desk, the words pulsing behind her eyes. The paper in the photograph wasn't decoration. It was a code. A record of a life about to vanish from one page of history and appear on another. She writes to a colleague, Dr. Marcus Reynolds, a researcher in coded language used in Underground Railroad communications. They meet in the quiet corner of the archive, the photo enlarged between them. Marcus leans closer. This isn't random folding, he murmurs. It's a symbol system used by conductors on escape routes. He points to the creases. Here, this angle, that's the path northwest. This triangle, that's the sign for safe house. And here, initials, JW and RL. Those could be station masters, people who sheltered fugitives. Sarah feels her hands tremble. This photograph wasn't a family portrait. It was a message, disguised and captured in plain sight. She searches through registries of freedom seekers, runaway notices, and sale records. And there, buried in a ledger from a New Orleans auction, she finds a name. Clara, age 22, sold from Richmond. Beside it, a description. Scarred hands, literate, resistant, property of Jonathan Ashford, sold on September 10th, 1859. A month after the photograph. But in the same book, months later, another note, faint, half erased, written in a different hand. Escaped, presumed drowned. Marcus reads it aloud and shakes his head. She wasn't drowned. That's what they wrote when they couldn't admit failure. She ran, Sarah. She ran, and maybe she made it. Sarah stares at the image again, at the steadiness of Clara's eyes. There is defiance in her face, not loud, not pleading, but knowing. She had already left, long before her body did. She zooms in on the photograph's background, to the right of the veranda. A pattern in the bricks catches her eye, faint chalk marks, drawn and half-wiped away. To most, they'd mean nothing. To Marcus, they're unmistakable. 3 vertical lines, a symbol from the railroad. It meant 3 safe houses remain. The plantation burned during the war, and with it, most of the family's wealth and records. But the photograph somehow survived. A moment of arrogance preserved in silver. And through that arrogance, Clara's rebellion outlived them all. Sarah begins assembling the story for publication. But as she writes, the photo seems to grow heavier, as if history itself resists exposure. Late one night, when she leaves the lab, she glances back at the table. The image glows faintly under the preservation light. The paper in Clara's hand seems brighter than before. Just a trick of reflection, she tells herself. But she doesn't turn off the light. When she presents her findings at the university, some applaud, others bristle. One senior historian dismisses it outright. Projection, he calls it. You're romanticizing coincidence. These symbols could mean anything. Sarah doesn't argue. She only shows him the pattern of creases one last time, the angles, the letters, the symmetry, too deliberate to be chance. And at the bottom corner of the paper, what she discovered just hours earlier, under ultraviolet light, tiny letters written in soot and ash, barely visible to the naked eye. They read, "Follow the river north." It's not proof, the historians say. But Sarah knows better. Sometimes truth doesn't need to shout. It only needs to endure. And yet, one question remains. If Clara escaped in 1859, how did her photograph survive in the Ashford collection for more than a century? Who kept it? Who made sure it never disappeared? Sarah finds the answer weeks later, in a dusty cardboard box labeled Miscellaneous Family Papers. Inside a small leather diary belonging to Eliza Ashford, the youngest daughter of the plantation. The final entry, dated December 1863, written in a trembling hand. The house is ash and ruin, father gone. I still keep her picture, the one they all hated. When I look at her eyes, I remember what freedom looks like. The river does not tell what it carries. It folds the names of the living into silt and keeps moving, patient as time. Sarah flies south with a copy of the photograph in her satchel and Eliza Ashford's diary page, folded like a prayer. In New Orleans, the air is thick enough to remember things. She walks from the archive to the old neighborhoods where shutters lean and ironwork holds its breath, and she thinks of a girl who learned to read by moonlight and then wrote a way out. Documents speak first. They always do. A ledger in a parish courthouse mildewed. Stubborn lists, 3 women bought from Richmond in September of 1859. ages guessed, heights approximated, the carelessness of ownership stamped into every line. Beside the second name, scars on hands. The clerk has written it as if cataloging damage to a table. Sarah copies the line anyway. Even indignities are evidence. A month later in the same book, the name is struck through. One word in the margin. Absconded. The hand that wrote it pressed too hard. The nib cut the paper. The anger of a man outwitted has a specific weight. She follows the mark to the sheriff's blotter. A notice. Runaway woman, literate, believed, aided. A reward offered, then raised, then abandoned. The last notation is petulant. Search discontinued. People like to believe failure is the same as completion. The city leaves other kinds of proof. In an inventory of seized goods from a raided boarding house near the river, Sarah finds a list too particular to be chance. 3 Bibles with hollowed centers, 2 quilts sewn with patterns not meant for warmth, and a stack of blank paper scored with diagonal creases. The officer who recorded them calls the items suspicious. He does not know what he has seen, but Sarah does. She copies the address. A woman in a small museum 3 blocks away knows the rest without being told. She keeps a card catalog for names that never made it to the official shelves. When Sarah says, Clara, the archivist looks at her fingertips, as if ink stains might reveal themselves after all this time. We don't always get whole lives, she says softly. We get a night, a street, a witness who spoke and then left. But a pattern is just a life we can't fit in one page. She pulls a drawer. Here. The card is unlabeled because some truths travel better that way. In pencil, C. Age, early 20s. Reader, keen observer, burns on hands. Moved people through kitchens. Trusted a carpenter called Jade Biwa and a seamstress in Treme who stitched messages into hems. No last names, no dates, a map disguised as a memory. Sarah walks the neighborhood at dusk. The houses exhale supper smells and old music. Windows glow like pages turned slow. She stands at the corner listed on the card and watches a door that used to be a station. No plaque, no marker, only the angle of a lintel smoothed by hands. She touches it. The wood is warm. She reads the church registers next. Baptisms done in hurried script, marriages entered between coughs, and in one margin, the priest's private note. A young woman, newly safe, asked for no holy record. I gave her water anyway. No name. The sacrament belongs to the body, not the book. But Sarah feels the line like a breath against her palm. It is not proof. It is enough. The river widens. Evidence thins. She finds a captain's log recording extra passengers taken on after nightfall at a landing north of the city. The initials of the paying party are written with caution. MC Marcus reads the scanned page beside her and nods. A station master, he says. Everyone thinks footpaths and barns, but steamboats were churches 2 people boarded and were changed. He traces the initials with his pen. Your photograph's paper had MC creased into its corner. She knew where she was going. They reconstruct a path from scraps, north along the water, then inland at a bend, where marsh gives way to scrub and scrub to pine. A seamstress's ledger shows 3 dresses taken in, paid for by a woman who left no name and returned no garment. A carpenter's bill mentions repairs to a door, damaged by men who claim authority. A Union officer's field notes in 1865 list 1 colored woman, extraordinary memory for roads and faces, invaluable to the cause. Her description is familiar by now. The hand that wrote it gave her no name and a rank she had never needed. Conductor. Sarah does not speak much those days. She listens. In the reading rooms, the guards talk softly to kill the longness of afternoons. On one of those afternoons, a retired teacher sits beside her and watches the way she turns pages. "You're not from here," the woman says, "but you're looking for someone who was." Sarah nods. The woman hesitates, then offers a folded photocopy. "My grandmother kept a clipping, said it was about a woman who moved like night and never lost a traveler." The clipping is from 1893, a memorial without death, to the lady they called the map in her head. Clara's name does not appear. It wouldn't. But Sarah can feel the gravity of the absence. If a thing survives without pronouncing itself, it is either a rumor or a miracle. This smells like the second. She returns to Treme and finds the seamstress's address, now a corner store where the bell over the door remembers other hands. The owner is a man with a soldier's neatness and a preacher's eyes. He listens, and then he climbs a ladder and brings down a tin box. "This was in the attic when we bought the building," he says. Inside, a set of paper patterns, edges worn, corners pricked, with the repetition of use. One pattern bears a seam of tiny stitches that do not belong to the shape of a dress. Marcus examines them and smiles not with joy, but with recognition. "Directions," he breathes. "If you stitch in this order, every fifth pricked hole marks a turn. You could wear a map through a checkpoint, and no one would know." Between two patterns, a smaller slip of paper falls into Sarah's lap. The creases are familiar, diagonal, precise, the geometry of escape. On it, in a cramped hand, a set of initials forms a chain, JWMCRLST. She knows them now. She has met their ghosts in documents for days. At the bottom, 3 words, "Follow the river." It is not Clara's writing. This hand is steadier, older, a teacher's. The slip smells of bay leaf. Somewhere, a kitchen served more than meals. Sarah photographs the paper and asks to borrow nothing. The owner nods. "What's kept us safe doesn't need to leave with you to go on working," he says. She understands. Some objects are talismans. Some are anchors. This one is a door you walk through and then replace for the next traveler. At night in her hotel, she sets the photograph of the veranda beside the new slip. The angles align, the crease an echo. Clara had held a map. Others carried pieces of it in thread and in memory. A body is the first archive. A neighborhood is the second. There is one more place the records point to, though then they refuse to name it directly. A cluster of cabins north of the city, now swallowed by pine and the insistence of summer. Maroons lived there, people who made their own country between swamp and fear, who cultivated silence like a crop. A surveyor's notebook from 1860 scrawls a warning, "Unreliable ground." The word seems chosen for earth and for allegiance alike. Sarah stands at the edge of what used to be a clearing. The canopy presses close, insects sawing the afternoon into thinner and thinner strips. It is not hard to imagine a circle of figures listening to a woman who learned to read the way rain learns the roof. She imagines Clara in the dim, voice low, details exact which door is safe, which fairy hand will look away, which dog won't bark, the kind of intelligence that keeps others alive. On the walk back to her car, she finds a shard of bottle glass the color of river water. The edge has been smoothed by years. It fits her thumb. She holds it up to the light, and the trees fracture into green maps. She pockets the shard, not as proof, but as reminder. Clarity can be a wound that heals into a lens. The next morning, an email waits from Marcus, a scan from a northern newspaper dated the last spring of the war. A woman called C led 8 to freedom this week, including 2 children, not her own. The lines around the item are births and deaths and market prices. The courage it records takes up 2 inches of column and changes the weather of a continent. On her way out of the archive, the director stops her. He has the look of someone who has decided to open a drawer he swore he'd keep shut. "We found a box during the last renovation," he says, "misfiled under household goods." He hesitates, then leads her to a back room. The box is small, ordinary, stained by something that once was oil and once was time. Inside, a single photograph curled at the edges, taken in a modest parlor somewhere far from pelicans and cane. 2 women sit side by side, not in matching dresses, not arranged like a confession. One has gray in her hair. The other's hands are wrapped in cloth. Between them, on a little table, lies a folded paper. The back of the photograph bears no names, only a date 1872, and 3 words, in a tidy northern hand: "She came home." Sarah's throat tightens. Home is a room, a person, a sentence that the mouth recognizes before the mind. She does not dare to name either woman. Naming would be a kind of theft. But she prints the image and places it under the first photograph, the one on the veranda where the world pretended not to see the object in the young woman's hand. 2 images, 13 years apart. In the first, a map folded for departure. In the second, a map folded for memory. Between them, a war, a river, a city that learned new work. That night, the hotel room is too small for the past. She sits on the carpet and lays the papers out in a line that feels like a road. Ledger, blotter, church margin, seamstress's stitch, captain's log, newspaper inch, parlor photograph. It is not linear. It is a braid. But the braid holds. When she returns to Virginia, Sarah asks to see the original glass plate again. The lab smells the way it always does dust that learned to behave, metal that remembers being ore. She slides the plate into the light. The veranda resolves. The family composes itself. The background takes its breath. Clara's eyes are the same, direct as a question you are not brave enough to ask. The paper in her hand gleams. Sarah magnifies the corner one last time and thinks, suddenly, of Eliza Ashford's diary. When I look at her eyes, I remember what freedom looks like. The youngest daughter had kept the photograph through ash and ruin. She had hidden it so that one day someone would find it and hear what the woman in the background had been saying all along. On the way out, the lab lights flickered just once, as if the building blinked. It's nothing. It's everything. In the reflection on the glass, for a heartbeat, Sarah sees 2 figures, herself, and behind her a woman with cloth on her hands, standing as if between centuries. When she turns, the room is empty. Rooms with proofs often are. She writes her report that night, with the carefulness of someone speaking in a church. The conclusion is plain. The photograph is not a portrait. It is a message captured in the act of being carried. The girl in the background did not ask to be centered. She centered herself with paper and the refusal to look away. There is more to tell, not just of Clara, but of the ritual that dressed captivity as grace. Other photographs begin to answer when asked correctly. Other papers unfold. The next chapter is already assembling itself on Sarah's desk. And somewhere, In a parlor north of the river, a folded note sleeps in a drawer beside a pair of cloth wraps stained faintly the color of ink. The house is quiet. The past has learned to breathe there without apology. Would you like me to continue with part 3, where the wider pattern is exposed? The jewelry that locked from the inside, the companions posed as equals, and the museum that decided to describe beauty as what it truly was, a tool. At first it looks like refinement pearls, ribbons, gilded cuffs. But beauty, in this century, was an alibi. Sarah's discovery becomes an ember that catches elsewhere. Across archives and museums, curators begin looking again at portraits, once labeled domestic companions, ladies, and their maids. Now, under light harsher than memory, the accessories start confessing. A bracelet that does not clasp, but locks. An anklet that hides a hinge, a thin chain welded beneath silk ribbon. What society had called grace was, in fact, a shackle polished to disappear. In a museum basement in Charleston, a conservator examines a family daguerreotype dated 1858. Two women sit close, their shoulders nearly touching, one white, one black. Their wrists bear identical gold bands, delicate, seamless. When the conservator disassembles the display for cleaning, the truth unfastens itself. The bands are iron, plated in gold leaf, their hinges filed smooth to fool the eye. Inside, faint numbers are engraved, inventory codes. The photograph's caption once read, "Mistress and attendant, symbol of Southern sisterhood." Now, the label changes to a single line, "Unrecorded woman, bound by ornament." Sarah reads about the finding in a quiet cafe at dusk. Her hands tremble slightly as she scrolls. The pattern is no longer singular. The deception was widespread, deliberate, systemic, aestheticized. She can feel Clara's eyes from that old photograph again, looking through time, warning her, what looks beautiful can still be a cage. Soon the letters arrive. People from across the country write to Sarah, descendants of families whose heirloom portraits now feel less like pride and more like evidence. One message carries an image, a painted miniature of two young women sharing a chain-link brooch. Handed down through the generations, the sender writes, supposedly as a token of friendship. But the chain is too short to be jewelry. It is the length of restraint. Marcus joins Sarah again. Together they visit the Museum of Southern Decorative Arts, where cases hold centuries of guilt behind glass. They're escorted into a locked storage room where a curator named Evelyn Quiet, measured, precise, shows them a necklace. Or rather, what once pretended to be one. It's called a parure, she says, her gloved hands hovering above it. Matching necklace, bracelets, anklet part of a set made for plantation weddings. Sarah leans closer. The metal is thin, fragile-looking, deceptively feminine. On the inside, not visible to the wearer, runs a line of script etched in acid, faint but legible, for display, not departure. Marcus whispers, "That's not a fashion motto, that's a command." Evelyn nods. The blacksmith who forged this one also made field chains for the same family. The technique matches. She removes the necklace from its mount. Sometimes the ornaments were detachable, sometimes they weren't. The silence afterward is a wound they all share. That night, Sarah can't sleep. The world outside her hotel window hums with lights and voices. but her thoughts stay in the cold vault of that museum. She pictures the countless portraits that line the walls of wealthy homes, each frame a disguised confession, each painting a small, controlled act of violence wrapped in velvet. She imagines the women the enslaved being fitted with gold instead of iron, told to smile, told to sit still. The click of the photographer's shutter was a lock turning, and no one heard it but them. Weeks pass. A decision ripples through the museum world. Curators, historians, descendants, divided, frightened, furious argue over how much truth to show. Some want the photographs removed, too painful, too explosive. Others, like Clara, demand they stay, but renamed, reframed, retold. Beauty has been an accomplice long enough, she says in one meeting. Now it must testify. The exhibition that follows is small, but seismic. Adornment and ownership, the hidden language of the portrait. Visitors walk through a hall of mirrored light and shadow. In one display, the gold-plated cuffs glimmer under glass, their hinges visible now. In another, a portrait hangs beside its newly discovered twin, the daguerreotype, and the documentation that exposed it. Each label a correction, each correction an exorcism. And in the final room, illuminated by one pale beam, Sarah's photograph, Clara's photograph, stands alone. The text reads simply, "A woman named Clara, enslaved in Virginia, holds a coded map to freedom. Her hand speaks for those who could not." Visitors fall silent before it. Some cry without sound. Some whisper apologies to ghosts they never met. Others walk out quickly, the way people do when they feel seen. But the photograph endures, patient, unflinching. The paper still visible between Clara's fingers. The creases, eternal. Later that night, long after the museum closes, the cleaning staff pass through with slow, careful steps. One of them, a woman old enough to have seen too many things vanish, pauses before the display. She studies Clara's face for a long moment. Then, without realizing, she murmurs to the glass, "You made it, baby. You really did." The motion sensors flicker, catching the faintest reflection, the ghost of a hand folded around the light. The winter comes early that year. The air in Virginia sharpens. The days shrink like pages torn too close to the spine. Sarah Mitchell has spent months with ghosts, and she is beginning to understand their patience. They wait for listeners, not believers. The photograph of the Ashfords and their servants now hangs under glass in the museum's climate-controlled gallery. Visitors stop, linger, move on. No one knows that the real mystery, the smallest, most dangerous one, still hides in the paper Clara held. 1. The fold that wouldn't open. Late one night, Sarah receives an email from the conservation lab. During the humidity adjustment, the paper's corner separated slightly. There's something underneath the top layer. She doesn't hesitate. By morning she's there, gloves on, breath shallow, eyes fixed, as the conservator lifts the thinnest veil of parchment. Beneath it lies another sheet, smaller, darker, almost fused to the original. It's not paper at all, but cloth. A square of muslin, stiffened with age and stitched with black thread in a looping pattern. The conservator frowns. "Not decorative," she says. "This was meant to hold up to water." Sarah leans closer. The pattern is familiar. 3 lines crossing at angles, a broken loop at the corner. It's the same code, the same route repeated again and again like prayer. But this one contains something new. Tiny letters, embroidered in the margins. Not, follow the river. But, the river remembers. 2. The Keeper of Shadows. Archives are full of contradictions, things that shouldn't exist beside those that shouldn't have survived. In the Ashford family papers, Sarah finds a name she's never seen before. Nora Whitcomb, great-granddaughter of Eliza Ashford, born in 1894. Nora was a librarian, unmarried and strangely private. Her correspondence includes a single reference to the plantation photograph in a letter dated 1921. I keep it here with the others. One day someone will look properly. The letter ends with a Latin phrase, short, deliberate. Servare lumen. Preserve the light. Sarah tracks down the family plot outside Richmond. Among the marble angels and ivy-choked stones, she finds Nora's marker. A simple tablet engraved not with her own name, but another. For Clara, who crossed. It takes her breath away. A woman born 35 years after emancipation, guarding the memory of another she could never have met. But somewhere between inheritance and conscience, Nora must have understood what the photograph meant and why it needed to endure. 3. The river at night. Sarah drives to the James River before dawn. Mist rolls low over the water, folding and unfolding like the edges of an unwritten page. She holds a copy of Clara's fabric map in her hands. Each stitch is a direction. Each direction leads to someone's survival. She thinks of all the rivers that have held secrets longer than nations. Water doesn't judge it, remembers. A local historian meets her at the bank, a man who has walked every curve of this river for decades. When she shows him the cloth, he studies it for a long time, then points upstream. That turn there, he says, leads to a set of hidden docks, old, built before the war, the last stop for anyone moving north, unseen. They walk along the edge until the path disappears into reeds. A single oak stands watch over the bend, its roots clutching the ground like a secret it refuses to let go. At its base, half buried in mud, lies a small iron plaque oxidized beyond reading. Sarah wipes it clean with her sleeve. Beneath the corrosion, faint letters emerge. In her hands, the knight learned how to draw a map. No date, no author, only a symbol in the corner, 3 lines, 1 broken. 4. The ledger returns. When she returns home, a package waits at her door. No sender. Inside, a small journal bound in leather, brittle but whole. The first page reads, Property of Nora Whitcomb. The handwriting inside alternates 2 different hands, 2 different centuries. Half the entries are Nora's, the other half are copies. Copied carefully, word for word, from something older. Sarah recognizes the voice instantly, Eliza Ashford's diary. Nora had preserved it, rewriting every page by hand, refusing to let it vanish into soot and silence. The last copied line stops mid-sentence. She went north by the river. I could not follow, but I sent the light. Beneath it, Nora had written her own edition. The light reached her. It always does. 5. The photograph speaks. Back in the museum, the curator calls Sarah to the gallery. Visitors have reported something strange about the photograph. At certain hours, under certain lights, the background appears to shimmer a faint gleam where the paper meets Clara's hand. Sarah stands before it, waiting. The gallery hums softly. As the ceiling lights flicker through their scheduled dimming, the reflection changes. For a heartbeat, the image breathes. The shadows soften. And for that single second, it looks as if the woman in the photograph is turning her head not towards the camera, but toward the future. Sarah whispers, "I see you." The glass fogs, briefly, as though something on the other side had exhaled. 6. The last light. Months pass. The exhibit closes. The photograph goes into permanent archive storage. But Sarah keeps a copy on her desk, framed not for decoration, but for duty. When students ask about it, she says only, "It's proof that truth has hands." At night, she sometimes dreams of the river, its surface glowing faintly with the reflection of candlelight, not from above, but below, as if the water remembers every flame ever carried to freedom. She wakes each time with the same thought, that some debts are paid not in blood, but in memory. And memory, when tended, becomes light. When the museum installs its final plaque, it bears a single line chosen by Sarah. The photograph is not a record of ownership, but of rebellion. One woman stood in the frame of captivity and hid the coordinates of freedom in plain sight. And beneath that line, smaller, quiet, almost hidden in shadow, the river remembers. Epilogue. Deep night whispers. The camera of history never stops taking pictures. It only changes who stands in the light. Tonight, we've followed a photograph through silence and centuries. From the plantation veranda to the archive vault, from the hand that folded the map to the hand that unfolded it again. This was her story, and the story of all those who dared to be seen when the world demanded they vanish. Because the night listens. And sometimes it answers. This was Deep Night Whispers. The river still remembers,